Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we are continuing our series on understanding the names of God. This is the third in the series. And what I was thinking is because tonight is one day before Purim, we've been learning about the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the four-letter essential name of God. Next week, we're going to move on to all the other names of God, all the what are called the sacred names of God, and see how they correspond to the Sfirot and learn about them. So I thought, instead of taking the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei and showing all kinds of different connections, I wanted to concentrate on Purim and Simcha and joy. That's one of the reasons I chose to play that song. Eze Asher Hasamech Bechelko. Who is the rich one? The one who is happy with his lot. And there's a Hasidic explanation, because the simple meaning is, who is the rich one? The one who is happy with his own lot. But there's an explanation. Who is really the rich one? Someone who could be happy with someone else's portion, meaning if someone else has something good happen to them, that they could really be joyous for them and not jealous or thinking, why him and not me? Eze Asher Hasamech Bechelko, with his portion. It's a very beautiful explanation. So what I want to do is very, very quickly, because this will be the last whole class about the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So I want to do a quick review of the major points that we made that are really, really crucial to understand. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I want to move on, but I think it's very, very important, a quick review. What we said is that the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey means to bring into existence, to bring into being. And that's why this name is so important, because all things come into existence through this name. By understanding this name, we understand the process of creation. And so therefore, the Yud is Tzimtzum, represents the primordial contraction. And we said in our own lives, any creative process is going to follow this idea of coming into being. And so for anything that we want to accomplish entails a tzimtzum, a focus of our attention, of our will, directed thought to make something happen. So the first part of the process of this name, which again brings everything into existence, is the Yud. The Yud is the smallest letter, represents contraction. The Hey, which is made up of 3 lines, represents expansion. From expansion, we go to the Vav, which is a straight line, and this is drawing down this energy into the lower worlds. And then the final Hey is also expansion. That's why this world is so full of multiplicity. So Tzimtzum, expansion, drawing down, and expansion. This is an explanation of the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Then we learned that it's a little bit different of a model, but it's very, very connected, that there are 4 major innovative ideas from the Arieh. This teaching comes from Rav Ginsburg, and he corresponds them to the name of Hashem, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. The Yud again is Tzimtzum. Before the Arieh, even though it's alluded to in the Zohar, no one really understood the implications of Tzimtzum. The Arieh created an entire cosmology based on the idea of the primordial Tzimtzum. And the second innovation from the Arieh is what's called Shvirat HaKelim, that the hay expanded and it broke the vessels. So this is Shvirat HaKelim, this is the hay. The third innovative idea from the Arizal is the idea of Partsuf, which means persona, which means that the Svirot, which could not relate to each other in the world of Tohu, in the previous world, in our world, of the world of Tikkun, the rectification is the interconnection between the Svirot. And that's what the Arieh called Partsufim, creating this dynamic interrelationship between the Svirot, and that's the Vav, because the Vav equals 6, and that represents Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. And then the final Hay is what the Arieh called Birur, clarification. And that Hasidus picked up on all of this, but especially the idea of uplifting the fallen sparks from the breaking of the vessels, and how our task, our job in this world, in our own private lives, in the whole world, is this idea of clarifying the sparks of holiness and light that have fallen into the material world, and upraising them and healing them and redeeming them. Next is, very quickly, very, very important that these 4 letters, and now we'll add the tip of the Yud, it relates to the Svirot. And as we said, this name, Yud Ke Vav Ke, is, as it were, the soul of the Svirot, which is like the body. So the light that is shining through the Svirot is really coming from this name. So the tip of the Yud is Keter. The Yud is Chachma, is wisdom. The Hey is Bina, understanding. The Vav is the 6 Svirot that I just mentioned. And the lower Hey is Malchut. This paradigm is used throughout Kabbalah and Hasidut. But again, all of this is to understand a process of coming into being. So here, by relating the Sfirot to the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, we see also the Sfirot become the vessel through which everything comes into being. And then finally, as we introduced last week, the correspondence between these letters and the tip of the Yud with what are called the 5 Kabbalistic worlds. Again, this is just a review. Is the tip of the Yud is what's called Adam Kadmon, the primordial thought process of the plan of creation in God's mind. The Yud is Olam HaAtzilut, the world of emanation. The Hey is the world of Bria, of creation. The Vav is the world of Yetzira, of formation. And the final Hey is our world, so to speak, Olam Asiyah, the material, physical world. So that is just a review, and I think it will be helpful when we continue tonight and go through different ideas. So now I'm going to share my screen. No, I'm going to do that again. Wait a second. There we go. Okay. So as I said, and I've mentioned it many times, that Rav Ginsburg's first book is called Sod Hashem Lireyav. And actually, I didn't mention this, but since then, there have come out a number of volumes on just the first chapter. In other words, this book is so condensed that it would take quite literally a library to explain what is in this book. The book is 500 pages or so. And it's all about the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the whole book, showing hundreds of different connections. So the first two is about Purim. And again, the way Rav Ginsburg, and this is not his chiddush, not his innovative idea, because already in the Zohar is using the name Yud K Vav K as a model, as a paradigm, as we learned about the Sfirot, an organizational paradigm in which to understand virtually everything. So the first two on this page are from Sod Hashem Li Re'av, and I'll explain it. So the first Yud K Vav K that we see, one second. This is from a verse in the Megillah, which says, "V'haita liYehudim ora v'simcha v'sason v'yikar," and it was to the Jews light and joy, happiness and preciousness. So the Talmud explains what this means. Light is Torah, because there's a verse that calls Torah or. The Torah is light. Simcha, joy. This is the joy of holidays, what's called Simchat Yom Tov. Now, why is the Yud Torah? Because Torah comes from Chachma, and we have also in the Zohar that says Torah comes from wisdom. The joy of the holidays, so this is the Hey. The Hey is always Bina. And the inner dimension, like we learned in the Sfirot, is Simcha. So the joy of the holidays is connected to the Hey of God's name. Then there's another word for joy. Here we put happiness, which is sason. And the Gemara says this is Mila, this is circumcision. And they bring a verse that connects, actually at a circumcision. We say this verse, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but it has the word sason, that the idea of circumcision is a very joyous occasion. And then and why the Vav is because the last of the 6 Sfirot represented by the Vav is Yesod. And Yesod is always connected, as we learned, with the sexual organ. And that is what is happening at the circumcision. The Brit Milah is dealing with the male sexual organ. And then the final Hey is called preciousness. And the Gemara says this is tefillin. And what's the connection here? Is because tefillin, even though they're such an incredibly high concept, tefillin are made from, the straps are made from the hide of a cow. In other words, here we have an example of Olam Asiyah using the very, very physical materials of this world in order to lift them up and make them into mitzvot. So this is our first example here of how we could see the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and Hey. Again, this is coming from Rav Ginsburg, pretty much exactly as I gave it over. Now, before we go on to the next one, I want to mention something that I'm sure everyone has heard, that this is the only book in the Tanakh that God's name is not mentioned. And this goes along with how we call the book of Esther, is called Megillat Esther, which means to reveal that which is hidden. And God's name doesn't appear. And in the story, it does not appear as if God is present at all. But one of the reasons that they made the holiday is when it was all over and we were saved from the plot of Haman, all of a sudden people were able to see in retrospect, because the story of the Megillah actually takes 9 years. From the beginning of the story to the end of the story, 9 years go by. And only in retrospect, after the salvation, could people see, oh my gosh, it's true God was hidden, but he was every step along the way, in a sense, had God's providence. So a Torah from Rav Ginsburg is on a deep level. Why does the name not appear? He said because the whole story of Purim and the whole holiday, that it's coming from a place above God's name. It's coming from the tip of the Yud. And so therefore, the name doesn't appear because it's, as we're going to see, it's almost in a category of its own, the joy of Purim. That's one of the things we are going to be learning here. So despite the fact that the name does not appear, some of you who have been watching 70 Faces, so we touched on this, is that there are a number of places in the Megillah where in an acronym, you have the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that some Megillahs are actually, the Sofer will, in a sense, bold these 4 letters of an acronym that are Yud Kei Vav Kei to point them out. So even though the name does not appear explicitly, it does appear in, wait 1 second. There, wait, let me see. It does appear in Rashi Teva. The most important one is the most enigmatic one. Yavo Hayom, Yavo Hamelech v'Haman Hayom. The 4 words, the first letters spell out Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Yavo Hamelech v'Haman Hayom. So this gets into the whole idea of good and evil, and how even Haman is playing his role. It says in the Gemara, when Achashverosh took off his ring and he gave it to Haman as a sign of his authority and his agreement to wipe out the Jews, the Gemara says it did more for tshuva than anything else could have done. So here we see, like very paradoxically, very mysteriously, how sometimes what the Baal Shem Tov says about evil, he says, Ra kisei latov. Evil is the throne of good. And this is, I shared on the WhatsApp a whole article about until you don't know the difference. Ad lo yada. And it has to do with the good and evil. I hope everyone will take a chance to read it. But also in Sofei Tevot, also the name Yud Kei Vav Kei appears backwards. And that is in the verse, Ze einenu shaveh li. This is, Haman says, Haman is now on the top of the world. He's going full steam ahead with his plan to wipe out the Jews. There's no one in the kingdom more powerful than him other than the king. And he sees Mordechai won't bow down to him, and he says, none of this means anything to me if I can't get Mordechai to bow down to me. This shows one of the most blatant examples of unbridled ego that you could imagine. Can you imagine? nothing means anything to Haman if he can't get Mordechai to bow down to him. So this is God's name backwards. But it was this craziness on Haman's part that actually led to his downfall eventually. It led to his downfall. So now I want to point out another thing, is this is the first time in the Tanakh that the word Jew appears. Mordechai HaYehudi. Haya b'Shushan, Ish haya b'Shushan Abira, Ushmo Mordechai. Mordechai HaYehudi. First time the word Jew is used. So I just want to point out that the name Jew comes from Yehuda, because Yehuda was the main tribe left after the 10 tribes were taken by the Assyrians. There was also Binyamin, and there was Levim and Kohanim, but Yehuda was the main tribe that was left unscathed. And if you look at the name Yehuda, it's Yud K Vav K with a Dalet in it. It actually has God's name in it, in the order. Yehuda is Yud He Vav Dalet He. So this is very important. We're saying that God's name doesn't appear in the Megillah, but here it does appear in Mordechai HaYehudi. Now, I want to mention one other thing. This is a very, very famous statement in the Tikkunei Zohar, which compares Yom Kippur to Purim. But not like we would think, not like we're comparing Purim to Yom Kippur. We're comparing Yom Kippur to Purim. Why? Because in the Torah, it's not called Yom Kippur, it's called Yom HaKippurim. And so the Tikkunei Zohar, like we'll call it a play on words, says Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, which is putting Purim in a certain way higher than Yom Kippur. So obviously this takes a lot of understanding, but very, very simply, first of all, I would say, where would we be without Yom Kippur? It's the holiest of holy, Shabbat, Shabbaton, the highest of the high. Yet that is not the example or the paradigm that we're supposed to live by 365 days of the year. It's so special because it's one day in the year where we don't eat, we don't drink, no marital relations, we don't bathe, we don't anoint, we don't wear leather shoes. So this is obviously it's such a opens up all the gates for us, but that's not how we're supposed to live the other 364 days of the year. Whereas Purim, this is one of the reasons the sages said after Mashiach comes, all the holidays in a sense will become nullified. Purim will last forever. Because Purim represents taking the physical and raising it up to the spiritual. That's what Purim represents. And that's why all the drinking and the eating and the partying, if it's done right, becomes an incredible vessel for spirituality. And that's even a greater paradigm for us to follow the whole year. So I just want to point out very, very quickly a beautiful thing of taking the name Yud and He and Vav and He in relationship to Yom Kippur. We're going to learn in a minute how we're going to connect the 4 mitzvot of Purim to the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. But on Yom Kippur, also the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is there. How? The Yud equals 10. The holiday of Yom Kippur is on the 10th of Tishrei. The first Hey, these are the 5 prayers that we pray on Yom Kippur. It's the only day of the year that we have 5 prayers. The evening prayer, the morning prayer, the additional prayer, the afternoon prayer, and then the 5th one is Ne'ilah, the closing of the gates. So it's the only time of the year. So that's the upper Hey of God's name. The Vav it's the only time of the year where when we read the Torah publicly, we only call up 6 people. The whole year, either on Monday and Thursday or Shabbos afternoon, we call up 3 people. And on a holiday, we call up 7 people. It's the only time of the year. And of course, Vav equals 6. And the reading for Mincha of Yom Kippur is all about permitted and not permitted sexuality. And the Vav, because of its shape and because it includes Yesod, always represents sexuality. And then the final Hey are the 5 things that are forbidden, which I mentioned already, eating and drinking, etc. So here we see very beautifully in Yom Kippur, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Okay, now let's go back to the chart. So the second grouping of Yud K Vav K is the 4 mitzvot of the day. And again, this is directly from Sod Hashem Rav, from Rav Ginsburg. So the first one is Mikra Megillah, which is reading the Megillah. And the Yud, again, is connected to Chachma. And I'm going to put this in here. Rav Ginsburg has a very interesting insight. He said it's the only book of the entire Tanakh where all the names of the Sfirot appear except Netzach. And Netzach doesn't appear because the whole story is about the victory of the Jews over Haman. So the Yud always represents Torah, Chachma, and in this book, there is so much wisdom. Again, I hope people who get our emails and the WhatsApp, I try to share a number of articles showing the depths of the Megillah and Purim. The Hey is the Su'udah Purim, the Purim feast. And remember what we said in Yud K Vav K, the Hey is expansion. So the feast of Purim is like no other. Okay, there was just a glitch here. Okay, here we go. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me? Okay, good. So the Sudat of Purim is like expansion. It's like beyond the beyond. That's the Hey of Hashem's name. The Vav, Mishloch Manot Ish L'Rehu, are the gifts of food that we give. And again, this is connected very much to the Chiddush of the Arizal, of Partsuf, of the interconnection of all of the Sfirot. Here it's the interconnection of all of Israel. Everyone is giving gifts to each other. This shows the incredible unity of the interconnection, inter-inclusion represented by the Vav. And then the final Hey is Matanot Le'avyonim, is the charity that we give to the poor. And in fact, Maimonides says that if you only have a certain amount of money, he said it's much more important to give it to the poor than have a lavish feast. If you have money for both, fine. But let's say you only have so much money, you have to have a feast. But he said, instead of going overboard on the feast, it's better to give it to the poor, because you bring so much joy to it. Someone has nothing, and they maybe don't even have money to make a feast of Purim, and then you give them money, and you cause so much joy. So now, the last Yud Kei Vav Kei here, since we're talking about charity, so this is a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. This is a very, very famous Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. On the left, we see this is, he compared the act of charity to Yud Kei Vav Kei, the process. So the coin, it's just a little coin. It's like the Yud. The coin represents the Yud. The Hey is the hand that reaches out to receive the coin. The Vav is the outstretched arm of the giver. And the final Hey is the hand that's holding the coin that will give it to the poor person. So this is a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. Again, using the Yud and the Hey, Vav Hey, to explain a process of giving and receiving. And then in the Tikkunei Zohar, they use the same Yud Kei Vav Kei, but for the wedding, where the Yud becomes the ring. Instead of a coin, the small coin, it becomes the ring. The woman stretches out her hand to receive the ring from the groom, but she puts out one finger. So this is the shape of the Vav. And then the groom, holding the ring in his 5 fingers, puts it on her outstretched finger. So this is from the Tikkunei Zohar. So here are just different examples, all using Yud Kei Vav Kei of explaining process of how things happen, how things come into being. So now, here we go to the second chart. So since we talked about joy, La Yehudim Haita Ora v'Simcha v'Sasan v'Ikar, and to the Jews there was light and joy. So here in the top Yud Kei Vav Kei, this also has the tip of the Yud, but we're going to start from the bottom. And again, we'll have to go through this fairly quickly, but this is a beautiful example. This is from Soda Shem Lirei. So we're going to start from the bottom here. This is an attempt to show, in a sense, all of the holidays and 5 different levels of joy. That's what we're going to be doing here. So we start from the bottom, actually, which is called Simcha Tmidit, continual joy. So this is just the joy of being alive. This is not for any particular reason or for every reason, but it's not connected to a holiday and it's not connected to Shabbat. It's just the joy of being alive. So this is the bottom of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Then we move up the ladder. We have Simchat Yom Tov. We have the joy of the holidays. And then the upper Hay, we have a mitzvah to be joyous in all of the holidays. But the holiday of Sukkot in the Torah mentions 3 different times that you should be joyous on Sukkot. So here we see this is a higher level than the regular joy of the holidays, because 3 times in the Torah, it tells us to be joyous during Sukkot. And that's, of course, we have what's called Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the great joy of drawing the water. And that's where people came to the Beit HaMikdash. And there was what we'll call an all-night celebrations, quite literally, all night with music and dancing and acrobatics and everything. Excuse me. Okay. And then the upper Yud, we have one holiday of the year that actually has the name Simcha, Simchat Torah. So this is even a higher level than the joy of Sukkot, that the entire holiday is a manifestation of Simcha. And all of this was to explain that the Kotso Shel Yud is the Simchat of Purim. And this might be surprising to people because, again, sometimes we think of Purim as just having a lot of fun and, getting dressed up and sometimes acting a little bit silly. But the joy of Purim is considered the highest of the high. The highest of the high. So this is another example of showing how the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is used to understand all 5 different levels of joy. So now we're going to go to the next Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And again, we're going to start at the bottom. And this is just another formulation of how we can understand joy. So the lower Hey is Kol Neshama Tehalel Ka. That the soul of every living being will praise God. This is, of course, the very last verse of the book of Tehillim, of Psalms. Every breath shall praise you. That's what the Gemara says. Don't read it every soul, read it every breath, because the word in Hebrew for breath, neshima, is very connected to neshama. It's the same root. And that, just as an aside, is showing the importance of breathing when it comes to meditation, is because the soul is very, very connected to breath. This is not just an Eastern concept. Of course, it is in the Eastern concept of meditation, but this is very important to understand that it's very rooted in Jewish tradition as well. This statement is from the time of the Talmud. I'll call neshima v'neshima. Every breath shall praise you. Okay, then we go to the Vav. Ilmanei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ozro ein yicholo. If God did not help a person overcome the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, a person would not be able to. So again, why is this connected to the Vav? Because the Vav are the svirot of the emotions, of the heart. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So this is where we all know from our own roller coaster emotional states that this is where the Yetzer Hara finds its opening. So the expression in the Talmud is, if God would not give us strength, we could not overcome the Yetzer Hara. So that is the Vav. The upper Hey is Hu hanoten lecha koach lasot chayil. He gives you strength to accomplish things, to do great things. And this is, again, we're moving up the ladder here, because a lot of the time we think of processes coming from above to below, but many processes go from below to above. So that's how we're explaining these different paradigms here. And then the upper Yud, this is what's called Etzem Hiyot Yehudi. And I'll just expand it for all of our viewers. This is called the inner godly spark. This is the little Yud. This is what's called the Pintala Yid. This is called being in the image of God, the divine spark, like a Yud, within each person. So here again, we've taken the idea of joy, and we've seen how it has many different applications, many different manifestations. Now we're going to do one more, and with that we'll conclude. Again, starting from below to above. So the lower hay is called shiflut be'etzem, pnimiut hamalchut shel kedusha. As we said, the lower hay is always associated with the sphere of malchut, and malchut is connected to shiflut. The inner dimension, we've learned this in the sphere, is existential lowliness. So this is the hay. There's a joy in understanding our true relationship with the creator of the world, where we understand that we're human beings and God is God. And it's not something we put ourselves down for, but we understand the existential gap between God and his creation and the human soul. Even though we have a spark of godliness in us, this is profound humbleness. And there's a joy in that. There's a joy in understanding who we are in relationship to God and accepting that and being joyous with it. Eza asher hasameach bechalko. Who is the rich person? The one who is happy with his lot. The vav is simcha shel hakarat tova b'hodaya. And in parentheses, it says, bina simcha ad hod itpashta. So it says in the Zohar that bina extends all the ways to hod. Remember, the inner dimension of bina is simcha. And so here the vav, though, is it stretches through the emotions. In fact, we always say that bina is the mother image, and the lower sphirot are her children. So this simcha is called the joy of appreciating what we have in life. It's very connected to the lower hay, that we, in great humbleness, we are joyous in what we have. Again, Eza asher hasameach bechalko. The upper hay, this is called simcha shel hitbonenut, because the word for meditation, the joy of meditation, is hitbonenut, comes to the word bina. So this is connected to the upper hay, and this, especially in Chabad, that there is a tremendous joy that comes from meditation, introspection, profound thought. And it could be meditation through prayer, it could be meditation through music, meditation through nature. But there's a great joy when we go deep, deep within and are able to connect our soul to our divine source. And then the upper yud is called simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of a mitzvah. And this can be explained once the Arizal was asked, on what merit did you have the ability to receive the kinds of teachings that you did from the upper worlds? In other words, what did you do to deserve this? how did you make yourself a proper vessel to receive teachings that no one had received up to them? The Arieh was just revealed in a short 2.5 years. Many people don't realize this. He was in Sfat for approximately 2.5 years. That was it. And then he passed away at a very young age. And his answer was Simcha Shel Mitzvah. He answered, because I have great joy when doing mitzvot. So this is, in a sense, is even above meditation, is the idea of the joy that comes with doing a mitzvah. Sometimes a mitzvah is prayer, is meditation. And other times it's very physical. But this is, again, the unity of physical and spiritual that Purim really represents. Simcha Shel Mitzvah. So tonight we covered a lot of ground, and we tried to connect this name, the essential name of God, to the holiday of Purim and the Simcha of Purim, because that is in a sense, that's the main emotion. We know that every month has what's called a chush. This is from Sefer Yetzirah. Every month has a sense. And the sense of the month of Adar is chok, is laughter, is joy. This is the headquarters of joy, in a sense. And as we saw, there are many types of joy. There's joy in different holidays, and there's joy in all kinds of different activities. But there's something about the joy of Purim that is, in a sense, like the tip of the yud. It's like the very highest level, and that's where we reach when we get to what's called ad lo yada. When we get to the place of not knowing, this is actually the highest level of knowing. And that is the Simcha of Purim. So I want to bless everyone with a meaningful, safe, joyous Purim. And we should see that joy spread in our lives and in the entire world. Remember, we've learned that the letters for Mashiach, if you permute them, are Yismach. He will be joyous, but he will bring joy to the world. That's what we're waiting for. Of course, we're waiting for there to be peace in the world, the knowledge of God in the world, harmony. But the Mashiach will also bring Yismach. He will bring reason for everyone to reach a whole new level of joy.